we live yet? We're live now.
There we go.
There we go. Oh, man. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever. I'm Matt Kimball, and I'm joined by Jason Anderson for the Morning Strategy IT Talk podcast. So I'm kind of down thinking about the Red Sox, Jason, and the only way they can beat the Yankees this year is when the Yankees totally crap the bed with errors. And that unhappy.
In Boston, we no longer care about the Red Sox because we have World Cup soccer.
We should still care about the Red Sox.
Nope. I'm all in on Cape Verde. Scotland sort of let the city down. Scotland was our hope.
Yeah.
They took over our town last week or a week before, whatever. It's been awesome. Now I think there's a lot of folks, especially where you're from originally in Massachusetts, there's a lot of Cape Verdean natives, actually. Heavy population, including my good friend and former CTO at Intel, John Vicente, right? A good buddy of mine who's from Cape Verde and grew up in the greater Fall River area. So, yeah, man, we're all in on the Cape, baby.
You know, where I'm from, Brockton has such a big Cape Verde population that when they do federal elections, they open up polling stations in Brockton for people to vote.
They do the same thing in Lawrence and Lowell for the Cambodian population.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
We're just a good old, everybody thinks we're terrible racists, but we're a good old melting pot here in good old Massachusetts. Well, we might still be kind of racist, but we're equal opportunity.
That's right. Anyway, we're here to talk not racism of sports, but IT.
Yes.
All things IT. And before we get into what we're talking about on this 9th episode, we have to do the disclaimer, Jason, which is don't take anything we say as advice for your portfolio, your investment portfolio, or financial planning. If you do, shame on you, and we have no liability. And we will ask you in advance instead of after to please like and subscribe, because chances are this is not going to be a good podcast, so you won't want to after.
By the end, you're not going to like us.
Exactly. So just do that now.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. Hey, we got a couple things to talk about. We're going to talk about AI moving out of the power user phase. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
And democratization. And then I'm going to do a quick HPE Discover recap. So how about you jump in and talk about your thoughts here?
So I think over the spring, right, we've seen everybody's come out with their own kind of user agent. And when I make a distinction with a user agent, because that's something where it's the front end, it's probably the first agent you're coming into contact with if you're an agentic user. That could be Claude Cowork, it could be Microsoft Copilot Cowork, it could even be GitHub, right? So if you look at these different user side agents, what has been kind of the mode of operation prior to the last couple of months has really been focusing in on a very specific persona. So Snowflake has an agent geared towards data folks, right? And you've got GitHub and Kiro and those products, Cursor, they're all geared towards developers, right? And these folks are power users, right? And now you've got, Cowork came out with Claude and Perplexity Computer came out as kind of a super agent type of thing earlier this year. And now all the enterprise guys are getting on board with it. They're building their own stuff. Amazon did Quick. Microsoft has their own version of Cowork, which they've teamed up with Anthropic on. Anyway, the point of these things is that they're still hard. Right. Yeah, I've been testing some of them out, and you start talking about things like, well, where's the second brain, or let's hook up an MCP server. And what it's a really interesting point for the industry, because everybody's looking at this like, well, here's this new great thing, and I use it and it's fantastic for me. All these executives are coming forward talking about how their daily use of this stuff and all those other things. Well, go look at their, credentials, because a lot of them have an engineering background or they've been in the tech industry for 25 years. They know what an MCP server is.
Yep.
They know how to copy and paste code snippets or execute scripts. They know how to do all this stuff, right?
Yep.
And what you see is all these tools coming out that are being targeted at, like, a financial analyst or an HR professional or whatever what may have you. And the consumability just ain't there.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of a little rant here is that, these ideas are great. And look, I'm a Claude Max power user. I'm dropping $200 a month on this thing, and I'm using it for all sorts of stuff. I derive an enormous amount of value out of the tool.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm providing increased value to clients and to others by using it. So I'm bought in. But I'm a power user, right? I'm able to do these things. So I found it kind of interesting when I started to poke on this concept of, but this is still power user. There's a lot of configuration, or, people don't know what this actually means.
Yeah.
And, oh, by the way, in this tool that the user might use at home, you call it a skill. And over here, you're calling it a capability or whatever that might be. There's just no standardization. So, and there just isn't any consistency. They all kind of look the same, but don't operate the same. So I think there's a real problem here, right? Because you already have, if you go talk to somebody outside of the tech world, they're sitting there hearing stories of AI about, hey, my kid just graduated college. I dropped $400,000 on college or whatever I paid for college education, and that kid can't get a job because of AI. Or you hear a few months ago, all these tech companies laying off experienced, skilled people because of AI. So AI has got a bad reputation in, let's call it, the general populace already. And now you're trying to bring a tool to people for the general populace, a tool for the general populace that isn't consumable.
Mm-hmm.
There's this real kind of need for an industry wake-up call on this, because the people who are marketing this stuff and talking about it are actually kind of being a little bit Pollyanna about it. And I think it's pretty short-sighted, right? Because they already have a negative reputation. Then they bring tools forward, and these tools come forward with, this notion of, well, everybody's using it and I use it and it's great. Well, no, you're a power user. You're in the top 1 to 5% of users.
Yeah.
You need to build something for the other 95%.
That's right.
Ultimately, when we run into these situations in the past, and I guess this is kind of how I'm going to close the rant, is generally this is where sometimes a device or a hardware company comes in and demystifies all this for everybody. And that could be iOS 27 and Apple Intelligence, right, as being that ultimate front end that becomes consumable, right? Yeah. But what I can tell you right now is that the enterprise software players need to kind of step up their game on consumability of these AI agents, because it's close. I will give you some credit, is once you get using it and get comfortable with it, it becomes a very powerful tool. But the flip side of it is that you ain't there yet. And I think you're going to continue to see challenges because the threshold for mass adoption is higher with these tools because of the cost. Yeah. And because of the reputation that has happened with this. Yeah. And the cost side is now something I'm going to start to look at really in depth this summer, because another piece of the equation that is also hurting these companies isn't just the usability and consumability, it's also how they're explaining the cost. Yeah. People were becoming very concerned about tokens, right, for a while. It was like tokens. But tokens are completely like an arbitrary measure. So now all these vendors have come forward with these kind of new pricing models of consumption that are like action-based or usage-based or whatever. And they're not consistent, and they're not based on anything. Yeah. And when I say they're not based on anything, I mean they're not based on anything in the real world, right? So John Deere comes out with a tractor. They're able to kind of point to it and say, this tractor versus tractor 1 versus tractor 2, I can plow 18 more rows per day with this tractor, right? That does not exist in the AI world right now. And that's right. And in order to go mainstream, you have to solve all this. You have to solve it all, or you're going to lose a lot of money on GPU spend and data centers and everything else you've built to support this brave new world. But if you can't get past this first step, we're gonna have a problem.
Yeah, it's funny. I look at the AI usability, consumability, usability, kind of across there's a consumer lens and there's a business lens. But at the end of the day, both of those audiences are still people, right?
Yep.
And I can remember when I was in the corporate world, and more so when I was in IT than when I was working for tech companies. And even the enterprise apps that existed, it took a lot of training, and it took a long time for folks to get used to those. And AI becomes disruptive to these things. These people are, to what you're saying, they are not, most of these folks that are sitting in front of, screens, monitors, are not power users. They're business folks that are processing POs. They're supply chain folks that are, ordering, or buyers, or, but they're not like super technical. And when Jason says, or Matt says, this is great and adds a lot of value, those people aren't deriving the value because they don't know how to use the way that we do. And you're right, until you can, I hate the term democratize, but until you can democratize these tools, there's zero value in them. It doesn't matter how powerful they are. There's zero value if I don't realize any value, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me. And I think this whole rant today was born of, I was on a call earlier this week, and somebody was talking about the pricing model, and they were saying, well, we've built a value-based pricing model. And I was like, but what's the value? Like, it was an empty word. I said, okay, well, what's the value based upon, right? What you said you built it. What's the value? To establish a value, you have to have an anchor, and there wasn't one. It was, well, and you know what I will say is that one of the nice parts of AI is that it puts a lot of data out there. So are we going to have this problem in a year? I hope not, because hopefully there'll be enough usage for them to get some delta and go, okay, now we have some precision to this understanding of how people are actually using these tools and what they're using them for. And then we can actually get to be a little bit more precise with pricing models, right? But that leads me to the last point, which is, and I actually said this on the call, is that, your sales force is incented to sell multi-year SaaS deals. SaaS teams and salespeople and marketing teams are focused on closing long-term deals and locking a customer in for a long period of time. If I were a customer right now, my hot take is I wouldn't sign up for more than 6 to 12 months.
Yeah.
Because number one, the cost of all this stuff is supposedly going down by leaps and bounds every quarter, which we're kind of seeing that slow a bit, but it did go down for a while. But then the other piece of it is also, well, it sounds like you're gonna have a better idea what your pricing and costs really are 6 and 12 months from now. So why should I have to bear the burden or take the risk myself, right? Yeah. You need some sort of pricing protection in those deals right now. And I think that's another very important point that people aren't thinking about, right?
Yeah. I don't think this is so different than any disruptive technology that comes into the business, right? From a usability perspective, from a how do you measure value and how do you price that value? This is even AI. I had someone I am friendly with. We were talking, and they were like, "Well, isn't this just really the next kind of wave of kind of technology to make its way through a business?" And is it, at the end of the day, is it really that different? And it's like we get so caught up in the technology and like where it is, right? But when you strip away, when you step outside of looking at this from a technology lens, it is certainly disruptive from you got to learn to use a new tool, you price it differently, but it really is just that next iteration of transformation.
Well, and iteration is such a good word, because if you go, you really set me up, dude. If you go look at productivity numbers from other industries over, say, the last 50 years, because this is how I spend my Friday morning, is what you find is that despite what people will say, if you look at the number of compounding over 50 years, like let's just pick on the automotive industry, right? The automotive industry has basically had gains of like less than 2% productivity a year aggregated over 50 years. Mm-hmm. And you go, how could that be? It's only 2%. That doesn't seem right. Well, the answer is twofold. The first answer is there's step function years or short periods of years where things gain. So, for instance, the introduction of robotics and logic controllers and all the like the electrical stuff in the 90s that came with modern manufacturing and lean processes Boom, big step function. Then it
Yeah.
flattens out for a while.
Yeah.
Boom, big step function. If you look at technology, it's the same thing. What's interesting about the automotive industry, though, is that it's also very tied to the macroeconomics, which is
Yeah.
another factor people are not, the vendors aren't taking into effect here, is that when you're in a macroeconomically volatile time, productivity does go down because output goes down. It's not because the amount of work or capital goes down, it's because the output goes down, and you're betting on that it will come, the economy will come back. And
Yeah.
so I do think there's this whole notion of people are kind of looking at it in the wrong way, because to your point, there's going to be a big step function for a while, maybe 2-3 more years, who knows? And then it's going to flatten out and everybody's going to catch up. And then there's to be the next thing. Maybe the next thing's, I don't know, vision or something, like a new type of user interface. I don't know. But the point is that the economics, when you start to look at the economics beyond a developer writes code 40% faster, this math starts to get hard.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 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 Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So
yeah. This is one of those topics. I think it's going to be a hot topic of conversation for some time too.
Oh yeah.
In the next 6 months, this will be one of your talking points at least a few more times.
Well, because the other one I brought up, that I brought up the point on this call yesterday. Another analyst came in right behind me, and he was amazing. He was like, it was like a WWF tag team match. I said, well, let me ask you a question. I asked it today. I said, why in the world would I sign a 3-year deal with your company if you're telling me that costs are going down on inferencing? If your costs are consistently going down and you want to charge me the same, what's the extra value? Where's that value gap, right? And the other analyst jumped in right behind me. He said, just go look at S3 pricing on AWS. Go look at the cloud. Because that infrastructure as a service, and this might be the good transition to you, infrastructure as a service pricing has consistently gone down for the same things over years. And it also, some providers do self-optimization where they'll come to you and say, hey, you're paying too much for this type of storage, so move to that type of storage, right? Yeah. Because it's going to save you a better deal. Ultimately, inferencing will have to become that, right? If it's going to keep getting cheaper, then you have to share those savings. And that's another thing that kind of the SaaS industry really hasn't had to do before. Yeah. So that's another real interesting thing. Like, what's the incentive to stick with these people over the long haul, unless they're going to save you money over that long haul as the price of GPUs, compute, and everything else continues to go down?
That's a big question.
Which might be a good chance to switch gears, talking storage and stuff, over to HPE Discover, where you were.
Nah, we don't want to do that. So I did 2 field notes in the last week on HPE, and it might seem excessive, but there were kind of 2 threads I was trying to pull on. The first is obviously the Juniper acquisition, right? This was the first Discover where HPE could unveil Juniper as an integrated part of the company instead of just talking about the potential. And then the other thread was around manageability. One of the kind of the bees that's been buzzing around in my head is going to AI and looking at it from the technical side, is the complexity of managing these AI environments, generative, agentic, all of the different variations of AI and inference you're going to deploy across your enterprise, and all of the infrastructure that goes along with it. And it was buzzing around in my head because HPE at Discover last year, Antonio Neri stood up and talked about this thing called GreenLake Intelligence. And it was effectively the self-driving data center, right? Your network admin, your server admin, your storage admin were no longer people. They were agents that had a bunch of sub-agents that worked for them, and they drove your IT operations for you. And I remember writing about it last year and thinking, man, this is a really cool vision. But in my head, I don't know that I put this pen to paper. In my head, it's like, well, you go to these events and people always talk a big game and a big vision, and then people forget about it 6 months later, right? Everybody forgets about it 6 months later. Well, they did not forget about it. In fact, they doubled down on that, and I'm going to lead with it. They doubled down on that GreenLake Intelligence and talked about how it's starting to come to fruition, how that vision is actually starting to turn into product. there is a shipping product called GreenLake Intelligence. It has an agent factory. It has, and it's starting to build out the building blocks of what that self-driving data environment, data center, data estate, whatever you want to call it, because data center seems outdated now. But how you manage that in an autonomous fashion, and how HPE allows you as an IT organization, CIO, IT director, whatever, to kind of set that knob to where you want your automation to be. I want it to be wholly automated. I want it to be somewhat automated, just like a self-driving car, right? 0 to 5, you kind of set the dial to where you want to go, and you go. And they did a double down on the different components: compute ops management, which is COM, ops ramp, which is kind of the FinOps element, all of these different pieces that are coming together to really to inform, collect, inform, create that ledger that feeds the entire kind of autonomous data center. Absolutely fascinating. I love this story. I've mentioned this before. We've been talking about the ability to do this for the last 30 years. I literally could blow dust off MRDs I wrote in the 90s about the autonomous data center, autonomous server network management. And it is truly starting to come to life. And HPE, like I say every year after I come out of Discover, they're like the really smart kids in the front of the physics class, whether you're in university or in high school. They're like the really smart kids that have the homework done before everybody else, that you want to be on their team when you have to do lab work or experiments, because they just get it. They're always out in front of the market and pulling the market along. I'm not saying that to the discredit of other companies, because these fast followers are very fast followers, but HPE always seems to be setting the direction. And I think this GreenLake Intelligence is another example of how they'll kind of drive it forward. The other side to that was networking and the integration of Juniper, and it actually has a tie-in to what I was just talking about. So we're starting to see MIST, which is effectively the Juniper OS and kind of management plane, integrating directly with GreenLake Intelligence, with COM, which is the management plane, so that you start to have more informed decision-making going on between servers and network, and workloads and network, right? So you can route traffic more intelligently. You can uncover problems. Typical IT scenario, an app is operating really slowly. The IT person blames the network person. The network person blames the IT person, and 4 days later, you figure out it was both of them. This takes all that away, right? Single console, single data plane, which means all of this data is being meshed together in a single control plane, which means you're able to respond to all of that collected data in a highly integrated fashion. Super, super cool. And on the Juniper side, from a switch and from a networking perspective, we're starting to see the integration of Juniper with Aruba, so that all of your WAN stuff and your kind of branch level and campus level networking is starting to become more integrated with Juniper, which is your kind of enterprise data center, or I should say data center focused networking. We're starting to see the integration of the networking itself. What's interesting is HPE is still maintaining two kind of control planes, one for, I shouldn't say control planes, interfaces, one for Juniper and one for Aruba, understanding that, those folks that have been managing Aruba Central for the last, 20 years or 10 years don't want to make a move. And you're not going to force them to use Juniper just because you've integrated things at a control plane level. And the other is, Juniper customers aren't going to necessarily want to adopt Aruba. So they're maintaining this kind of these separate paths for now. I'll be curious to see if they eventually kind of merge as one.
They shouldn't.
One last thing. Yeah, I know. I hear you. But make no mistake about it, HPE, whereas last year I would have said Dell, Lenovo, Square in the sites of where HPE wants to hunt, I think you're starting to see this move more toward a Cisco kind of compete landscape versus a Dell and Lenovo. And it's going to be a really fun and interesting fight. And just like in the chip world, I think this is good for everybody. HPE is going to push Cisco. Cisco is going to push HPE. They're all going to push Dell, and it's going to lead in Lenovo, and it's going to lead to a lot of value for enterprise. And I'll shut up there and let you talk. Sorry.
Yeah, I think I think the move to not do some sort of grandmaster unification of the control plane is a great idea, because ultimately, that's probably going to be an agent or a set of MCP servers, right? I mean, just as people, you're starting to see people now more actively, and like I said, that class of user also is maybe the next tranche in power users who could become agentic. And why would you want to, put a bunch of money? Usability is expensive, right? So if you want to put it into some sort of third party type of capability that allows you to bring these things together, right? That's my first thought. The second thought is that this kind of idea of them elevating to the Cisco levels fascinating, because you're now starting to see, and this is where I really think the market's going, is that as I mentioned, right, you've got these periods of fast growth, and then you've got these periods of flattening.
Yeah.
The periods of flattening is when you start getting into like incremental gains and savings and price disruptions and things like that. That's where you really see commoditization and in our world, open sourcing really start to happen in a heavy way in the software world, right? So we're not in that period now, right? We're in a period where we're going hockey stick land, right? In terms of capability, right?
Yeah.
So when you think of it that way, what happens during those times is when people start to make strategic bets on fewer vendors versus more vendors, right?
Yep.
So, but to your point, when people start to make those strategic bets, it's a very kind of conscious decision at the board level, where they're sitting there going, do I want to invest in a value play? Or do I want to invest in a service play, right?
Yep.
And I mean, that's really where you start to see those kind of higher end, higher cost vendors shine, because that's when people go, you know what? These people have the breadth, they have a vision, and not only do they have a vision, but they're going to keep putting money into it over time. So it's a sustainable vision that I can follow. And there's a price quotient that you have to pay for those types of relationship capabilities, right? Those are the types of things that are worth investment, especially in less certain and kind of rapid times. So the timing is right for HPE to make this decision to up-level themselves. But it's also good, to your point, it's good for the industry, because it kind of promotes a different type of choice, right? And the choice becomes less about, existing relationships and more about direction. And that's a good thing, right? Because maybe you are like, hey, for the last 15 years, I've been getting away with buying super micro stuff, and I can just use VMware, right? And now you're going, well, wait a second. That may not be as automated. That may not have the types of things I want. Maybe I should recalibrate my decision for the next, say, 5 or 6 years towards a higher value play. And I'm going to get a different type of benefit out of it than I've gotten for the last few years. And I think that's the stock people are really trying to take right now in this age. It's not just about AI and agent and model and all that other stuff. It's more about, okay, we are at a point of disruption. What do I want this business to look like in 5 years? Do I want to be the value leader? Do I want to be the premium price? Do I want to be the ultra high service? It's like I keep saying, what Walmart wants out of AI and what Nordstrom want out of AI are completely orthogonal and different thoughts.
Yep.
And that's okay.
Yep. Oh yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. It is super interesting. What is also interesting is AI, and this is going back to kind of looking at AI from a technical perspective and not kind of how users consume it. But from a technical perspective, AI is completely disruptive from an infrastructure perspective, right? I mean, the way infrastructure is being deployed, I mean, you're setting up AI networking versus your enterprise networking, AI, servers and storage versus, your traditional or your classic. So it's like, this is a whole new kind of battleground for HPE and Cisco and Dell and Lenovo and everybody else to kind of fight over. And there's a real opportunity for whoever wins that that front for them over time to become, because look, eventually all of your infrastructure is going to be AI, right? I mean, this estate you have of classic or legacy infrastructure, it's all going to be moving away, because you're going to have, everything's going to be effectively AI infused, right? You're going to have agents running everywhere and So even those classic workloads are no longer classic workloads or AI workloads, right? So it's like you have this opportunity to if you can land that AI infrastructure piece to really expand across the entire data center, so that that legacy infrastructure you have running today gets smaller and smaller, that AI estate gets bigger and bigger over time. And before you know it, you wake up, and if you're displacing Cisco, you are the new networking, primary networking layer for the
Yeah.
organization, or vice versa.
Well, there's also a manageability aspect to it. To your point, is
Mhm.
I actually look at it as not necessarily AI infrastructure, but more manageable infrastructure, right? Where, is your general purpose compute going to go? Does your general purpose compute need to go into an AI network? Not necessarily, but your general purpose infrastructure needs to be manageable enough that an AI network can actually work with it, right? And I think that's where you're going to see the convergence. It's like I was talking to a company that has a legacy product effectively, right? I mean, it's still actively marketed and sold. It still has a pretty big install base, but it's not what it once was. And my comment to them was, you should stop thinking about preventing being migrated from. You should start thinking about how you're a participant in this world, because AI may be able to slow your decline, because you will be more manageable and you will be more agentic, and you will be able to have agents fill gaps and skills in terms of how you're managed and or software gets upgraded. So now all of a sudden your moat may become stronger in that regard, right? It could.
Yeah.
Instead of migrating away, now maybe it's more about defending the base versus preventing the slide type of mentality.
What I would counter with is, I think 10 years from now, there's no such thing as general purpose compute, just like there's no such thing as a real CPU anymore, right? Everything is being tuned. 10 years from now, your general purpose compute is, your applications are all going to be agent driven, right? They're going to be agent architected, agent driven. We're moving away from your traditional 3-tiered kind of, or even cloud-based. This is what your applications look like. There are similarities or parallels in construct, but it's a different world you live in, and it's not a VM world. It's not a new I shouldn't say not a VM world. It's not a VMware virtualization world.
Yeah,
virtualization world.
but if you have certain elements of compute that can be run for a fraction of a cent, and other elements of compute that are going to cost $1, you have to accommodate that. You can't. This is the whole thing people argued with early stage AI, which was, it's going to replace, transactions. Well, I can run a transaction through a mainframe for less than a penny. And if I run it through an agent, it costs me $2. Yeah, well, I'm still going to do less than a penny.
And how many mainframes are there on the planet?
Plenty.
No, not really. Not compared to distributed.
But my point is also, when you talk about it in the sense of deterministic processing and general purpose compute, still is economically exponentially cheaper
today.
Well, then you have to see AI get there. That's my argument is, you don't get there if there's still a gap between those two costs. That shit stays.
I don't think it stays over time. I think the economies of scale change over time.
Possibly.
In the prices you're seeing to drive agentic workflows today are going to be drastically different than they are 10 years from now. It's just a function of scale. You have limited supply, you have excessive demand, and it's driving the cost up more and more as more entrants come into the market from an infrastructure perspective. And as more companies adopt this model of software delivery, your prices come down. It's a natural.
It is, if you can actually still physically do it, and there's still a lot of unanswered questions as to how small you can go. There's a lot of questions still about power. There's still a lot of questions about cooling. So, can you get there? The answer is, if you follow the trend line, the way you're suggesting, you're correct. I don't necessarily know if we start bumping into laws of physics more often and that becomes a problem. That's my argument.
Yeah. We can disagree on that one.
Yeah, we can. It's okay.
Yeah. And by the way, your pointer on the mainframe is, though it's accepted, you got to remember the way the mainframe has become an island inside of a sea of distributed computing, right?
True.
Despite its pennies per transaction versus
And the real question is it the pennies per transaction or is it the cost to leave, right? And that's still the big argument is it and the reality is that AI has drastically simplified leaving, right? The question is, can those vendors continue to deliver a value promise? Now that the barriers to migration have gone down, the question is, can they continue to stand with their value propositions around reliability, cost, and those types of things? If they don't, they lose. You're absolutely correct, right?
And that's interesting too, because I promise we'll end here in a second, folks. But I was at the Broadcom mainframe analyst event a couple of weeks ago, and we had an interesting conversation around this. And as AI can be deployed to greatly increase resilience, right, and uptime, and maybe not get you and performance, right? If AI is able to achieve all of these things, right, what does the value of that mainframe become? And it's not that people should move away from the mainframe, but folks that have mainframes have to figure out how the mainframe integrates into this brave new world, because you no longer run as an island and make claims that you can't attribute to distributed, right?
Right. Yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be really fun to watch. And by the way, I think there's great value that the mainframe brings. It's not talking down, but it's going to be this is where I think from a tech side, AI is just so flippant disruptive.
Oh yeah.
That I think a lot of folks don't. They just, to what you're saying, they think about generative and chatbots and maybe ChatGPT, but there's so much more from an infrastructure perspective.
Oh yeah, for sure, absolutely.
Anyway, all right. So we're going a little bit long because of a fun discussion. What do you got coming up for travel over the next few weeks? Anything? We're hitting summertime.
Nothing. Good. Research summer.
Good. Good for you, man.
First big piece dropped. Well, first big piece went to our editor. So hopefully you'll see something. Next time we meet, we'll be talking about my latest piece of research, which is about these user side agents and what to be looking out for if you're thinking about deploying them, because there's some real tricks to it. And to be honest, it's 1.0 technology. So, there's some things I'd also like to see happen, maybe before you think about an enterprise scale deployment. Maybe the best thing to do is start with the team first. So yeah, I'm a new piece of research. Like I said, by the next time we meet, that'll probably be my topic.
All right. I can't wait to talk about it. I'm going to be with IBM in a couple of weeks, then with AMD in a few weeks. And then I think I'm somewhere, VMware, strangely enough. So, but yeah, it's going to be a nice slow summer, and you get to enjoy your minutes from the beach. I'm hours from the beach.
Yep.
You'll be able to enjoy yourself up on the North Shore, where it's cold water and good clams. So
you betcha, baby.
Good for you.
All right, everybody.
Until next time.
See y'all later.